Right.
Welcome everyone that can hear me. We're just getting started with our IRB webinar. We're going to wait a few minutes to see who comes in, and then we'll get started. We ask that you stay muted. I'll go through that again. And please feel free to pop into the chat where you're from, calling in from, any other information you're comfortable with sharing. And we'll have a little dialogue there in the chat. We're going to use our Q&A function for questions, but I'll go through all that. So welcome again to those of you who are in the waiting room. We have a couple more people coming in. So you'll hear me say a few things a couple of times as people come in, but welcome. And we'll get started here in just another minute or so. Thank you, Dr. Tribble, who's helping out today. I'll be introducing myself and Dr. Tribble here in a second, and then we'll get started. So we have several people showing up, which is great. We weren't sure how many people would be showing for today's webinar. We didn't quite have the reach without the help of the GSSE. So we're doing this one on our own, and we'll welcome everyone who's come. I think the activity has slowed a little bit, so I am going to just go through a bit of housekeeping and then we'll get started. So welcome everyone to our webinar. Please type in the chat where you're calling in from, and then we'll see some people coming in over the next few minutes, but we want to get started. So this is our webinar. It'll be about an hour long. You can certainly, if you have to go, go at any point. I'm going to show you where you can find the recording and the materials, but please hang around if you can, and we'll have opportunities for questions throughout. So our topic today is, can I actually do this research? And the IRB discusses feasibility. So feasibility, commonly described as, can you do something? And so we're going to talk about that in the context of research. Now, from an IRB perspective, feasibility means some consistent things, as say with your dissertation chair, or if you're a faculty member with your research agenda. But for us, we think about it from the lens of human subjects research. So we're going to talk about the components that relate to feasibility when you conduct human subjects research. You can see here we have a couple of things listed. You've probably read this already. And thanks to those of you who are just coming in, we're just getting started. And we will use the Q&A function for questions, right? And so we will attend to those questions throughout. You can see that on the bottom line there of your commands in Zoom. We also have the chat function, and I can see by the red number that folks are adding where they're from, which is great. Possibly you'll even make a connection with someone through that chat. We'll be focusing on the Q&A for any questions that you have in the session. So let's get started. And thanks to all of you who have arrived. My name is Chad Becker. I'm an IRB education analyst. I work in the IRB, the Institutional Review Board. And with me tonight is Dr. Kelly Tribble, who is also an IRB education analyst, and he will be attending. Sorry, Kelly.
Hey, everybody. Clearly, I need to update my profile picture, but hello, everyone.
And so Kelly's joining us from Tyler, Texas, and I am in Terre Haute, Indiana. Neither of us are from the places we're joining in from, but those are stories for other days. So we're going to be providing you with the presentation today, as well as attention to your questions throughout. So we have this webinar, it's being recorded. And we also have a couple of places we're going to put it. So we have our own webpage, and we have our YouTube channel that you can link to from our IRB website. For a question and answer, we're going to take that from the Q&A. We'll also look at the chat to see if anybody threw anything in there by accident. And then we will provide answers in a written form and send that to all the attendees through email. So you've registered for this, we have your email, and we'll be able to send that along in the next business day or two. We'll provide answers as best we can in the webinar, and then we'll provide that to you through email. We'll also have that posted on our webinars page. So you can go there and find recorded webinars and Q&A documents for our previous webinars. If you haven't been to our IRB web page for webinars yet, that's a useful resource. So let's just get into the very basics before we get started. I won't take too much time with this, but I do like to review this at most of our webinars just to give an idea of where we're coming from and how that might intersect with the work that you're doing at National University, whether that be as a faculty member, staff member, a student, or any of our other community members. So an IRB is a committee designated to protecting human subjects, and our sort of power derives from the common rule, what's referred to as the common rule 45 CFR 46, published by the National Institutes of Health. What we're not, though, is we're not a body that gives guidance regarding programmatic aspects for students. So we won't be able to really help you with your courses. We won't be able to really help you with your method and design. Those are more for your chair. For those of you who are working professionally here in our community, those are for you and your research community, your peers, to help you decide if you've met the kind of academic and methodological aspects of what you're doing. Unless, and that's kind of a big unless, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, unless you have it's kind of an intersection with risk. So we will make a note if your method kind of provides or kind of causes a risky situation for your potential participants. Potentially will push you toward a different method, maybe an anonymous one, something like that. So that's the only time the IRB really gets involved. Let me stop and ask Dr. Tribble, how are things looking on your end? Are we having any issues with the PowerPoint? My coming through okay?
Yep, it seems good to me. I can see your PowerPoint and hear you loud and clear, and we don't have any complaints from the chat yet
All
about
right,
all.
I saw a few things pop up and I wasn't sure. All right, thank you. So let's continue on briefly with just an overview of what we provide, right? And then we'll get into the specifics of feasibility. So as an IRB, we have resources and services that are open to all NU community members. So any level of student, anyone else who works with the institution. And for student principal investigators, PIs, you'll hear me use PIs throughout, and that just refers to whoever is kind of doing the research, who's submitting the application. So if it's a faculty member, or if it's a staff member, or if it is a master's student, perhaps a doctoral student, you're a principal investigator, a PI. And for students in particular, you can utilize our services at any point in your program. Some people feel like they can't access our resources and services until they're in their designated class for it or something like that. But ours are open. And you need not be enrolled for some dissertation students. So this doesn't apply to all dissertation students who might be in the room, but for some of you, you don't have to be in these courses, these specific courses listed in order to use our resources and services. So here's our agenda, our preview of our agenda. Here is a quick tour of our services and resources. That's 2 slides. I'll go through it really quickly. Same with the application, but a lot of people have questions about our application. So I want to throw a little bit of information your way regarding that. And then we'll get into the feasibility of human subjects research. You can see we have a repeat there of our topic list for that from our description. And then just a very brief review of the application timeline at the end, since that's such a topic of concern for folks who come to our webinar. So really briefly, this is a PowerPoint that will be sent to you with the Q&A, and it is a hyperactive linked PowerPoint presentation. So hopefully you can kind of see my little hand there and see these different hyperlinks that you can go to kind of work your way through our process. These are resources that are meant to guide you throughout. So getting started with us, learning what's required, what kind of documents you might need to provide with your application, services that you might need. I'm going to show you those on our next slide, as well as help materials. So this could be a video or a document that'll help you figure out one component of your application. We also have some newsletters and a YouTube channel, so make sure to visit those if you haven't already. These are our services that we provide. These are ongoing services. So we have group sessions where you can meet in small group size settings, 6 to 8 people, for discussion of and review of your materials for eligibility criteria, recruitment, and consent. So our sessions are interactive. There's a short presentation, and then the session leader will go through the feedback that they are providing on your materials. They'll also send those to you later after the meeting. So you not only get our written feedback, but you get an opportunity to discuss it after a short presentation about some of the most important components of any IRB application: eligibility, recruitment, and consent. We also have a group session for how to figure out the IRB application system. For those of you that haven't heard it yet, Cayuse is the name of it, and we have information on our website. And this group session will help you navigate applying. So that's also a great group session. There's no interaction necessarily. You do have the opportunity to ask questions, but there's nothing to submit for that. We won't review your application before you submit it. We'll just help you understand the components to it. So if you have specific questions or you want to just see an overall look at the application, you can attend that group session. These are all you're able to sign up for these on our website. So if you follow these links to our group sessions and our office hours, you'll be able to schedule with us. We also offer these office hours. They're 15 minutes of one-on-one interaction with a staff member. So please take advantage of that. If you haven't already and you're at that point where you kind of qualify, if you take a look at our website, you'll see what we mean by that. We like you to kind of take a look at things before you schedule an office hour with us. But if you do have questions, please reach out and schedule. We have these webinars. And you can see that I think we've done 6 or 7 of them over the last 2 years about relevant topics, some of which you see here on this page. So you can also watch those asynchronous resources. And as far as the application goes, we really like for you to get started in the right way. So we have a page devoted to that that's linked here and contains these 5 components. City training, many of you have already done that as part of your coursework. We do have a few institutional policies on our website we'd like you to review just to make sure you're not running afoul of any of those. And then right there in the middle is what we're talking about today, considering the feasibility of your study. You heard me mention the group sessions, and then of course Cayuse as our application guide. So this is just a little reminder link of how to go through our process. And even if you're not at this point, you will benefit from today's presentation for sure. So before we get into this, Kelly, have you encountered any questions?
No, we are doing okay.
All right.
Nobody's
Well,
posted
welcome
anything yet.
everyone.
And welcome everyone. And yes, and it's all must be all clear because
All clear.
nobody has any questions yet.
So just since everyone was kind of coming in, my name's Chad. We have Kelly on the Q&A, and we would like for you to put any questions that you have as we get started in our content. So this is where you're likely to have questions into the Q&A. We'll pause, we'll answer them. Kelly will do his best to answer them in text, and we'll work our way through. I'll stop every now and again. Kelly will give me an easy one that I can answer for everybody, and then we can move on. But we'll make sure that we check for understanding as we go. So, feasibility of human subjects research. First, let's define feasibility. Now, this is as it relates to research, but it's pretty much the same thing for everyday definition of feasibility is, can you successfully conduct, what it is that you're trying to do? What is the chance that you will be able to do it? And that refers to feasibility. So when we think about research, there are several things that we need to consider. And we're talking about, can you successfully complete your research and can you do it ethically? And we'll talk about what that means throughout our presentation. And then, can you do it within given resources like time and who you might have access to, as well as any constraints. So those of you that are researching K through 12 environment, you're very familiar with what restraints come along with that regarding certain times of the year. So that's an example of a constraint that we run into quite a bit. And when it comes to thinking specifically about feasibility of human subjects research, we need to consider these components. Now, some of these may or may not apply to your proposed study. Uh, Mostly the top 5 do, or top 4 do. So topic selection, are you choosing a topic that is feasible? Can you complete it? Considering those various factors on the left-hand side. Are you working with any special population that might create feasibility issues or access, or how you're going to do it? We have cultural context that we must consider when we think about feasible research. And we're going to talk about each of these on the right in a bit more detail as we go out through our presentation. Another is investigator experience. How experienced are you as the investigator with the groups that you're researching, the topic that you're researching? We need to make sure that you are prepared and therefore minimizing any risk that might be involved for human subjects in your research. Site permissions. So are you getting the appropriate permissions to access the resources that you're proposing to access? This, of course, is an ethical concern to make sure that we have the appropriate people saying, yes, you can do this. And some of you may have those site permissions, others of you may not. Some of you may have multiple IRBs involved. Those are a bit more rare. And then for the students in the room, which usually do constitute a large part of our populations when we give these webinars, we have program-based research requirements that can impact feasibility. All right, I see we maybe have a question, so I'm going to stop and ask if that's the case, Kelly.
Yeah, we do. Dawn posted. She's had a question regarding study feasibility that will involve the use of secondary data. She's
Sure.
already obtained permission from the health facility to use de-identified personal health information, but she came across the data use agreement template and wasn't sure how that form worked.
Oh,
So.
yeah. So that's a bit specific of a question, but I can answer it really quickly. The data use agreement would kind of operate in place of site permission. So if you have a permission from an authorizing figure who can give you access to that data, then that is all that you would need. Sometimes we use data use agreements for other more complicated situations, but this one seems pretty cut and dry. All right, if you have questions about that further, as you see what we present here today, please feel free to continue asking questions if you have any follow-up questions. And that's for everybody in the room. Please reach out if you have any questions as we go. We're going to get into kind of the different topics here on the right-hand side. So we do have a checklist. It's called the Feasibility and Benefits Checklist, and it's on our website. I have it linked here. You'll see a couple of times if you follow the links that I've provided already. It's on our Get Started page. And it's, remember, the third of 5 things that it's required to get started on your application from that chart I showed you. And this is just a snippet of that document. There are several other categories, and then kind of your notes as it relates to different questions that you should ask yourself about your study to determine if you uh, can complete it, right? If it is feasible. It's not just, do I have an idea? that's researchable. It's the logistics of how you do your research that will lead to it ultimately being feasible. So we have this checklist that you can use to attend to each of the different components that you'll see me talk and hear me talk about today. And that way, hopefully, before you get too far into your proposal, your IRB application, your ideas toward what your research is, you'll know the answers to the questions and be able to say, yes, this is feasible. If you move forward with something that ultimately isn't feasible, and we run into this quite a bit with students who can't get the population, enough of the population to agree to be in their study, then you've come such a long way to run into that issue that might be a barrier to see your successful completion of your research. So thinking about it ahead of time is important, and that's what we're here to do. So for topic selection relates as it relates to feasibility, sometimes researchers will choose a topic that's too broad, too big, right? Try to solve too many problems in one research study, too complicated, too time consuming, and or too risky. And these are kind of topic related feasibility issues. I just showed you a lot of text there, so give you a second to kind of take some of this in and go through it briefly. What I often tell my own dissertation students is I've worked as a full-time chair online at NU, at NCU, and I also have worked with some students on a part-time basis here as I work with the IRB. So I have a lot of experience, and topic selection is one of the first things that students and their chairs or researchers in general need to consider. Can I accomplish this in one research study? Or would this be part of a larger agenda that I have regarding research? Is there time? Is one of the big factors. Also, how accessible is the population? Can you actually gain access to the population? Sometimes people have very good ideas for studies, but they're just not able to access the population, whether because they themselves kind of don't have the reach and can't get permission to reach out to the right people, or it might be something that the people that you're trying to research don't really want to spend the time giving data to a university researcher, whether it be a student or not, because their lives are too busy. So we have sometimes people researching people in leadership positions and never being able to recruit any of them because they are too busy. How will you gain access to the population? Is there permissions that'll be required? And we'll talk about that a little bit later with site permission. Can you actually get that permission? Right? And then how long would it take? Maybe you have time constraints. You're in a program, you're in a course, you're in a period where you're looking as a faculty member to have research done by a specific time. And then how risky is your topic? We do see a lot of benign topics come through our IRB, and when we're usually great with that because that means the risk level is pretty low. But we do have researchers in fields working as faculty, staff, administrators, working as students who do have risky topics due to the nature of their discipline. So will those participants be asked, risky questions? Will there be information provided from the research participant that could potentially get them into trouble or trigger them to having some sort of revisit of their trauma? All right, so topic selection. Seeing any questions at this point?
Just one, I forget, we're recording this, I know, are we going to send everyone the link to this video or not?
So typically what I do is I after the webinar will provide the Q&A, the PowerPoint presentation, and I can link to our video. The video will also appear on our webinars page, which links to our YouTube channel. So eventually everything will link to the YouTube channel for the video. The video takes a little bit of time for me to administratively do that. So by about this time tomorrow, you should expect an email with the link to the video, the Q&A that's completed, and then also the PowerPoint presentation with live hyperlinks.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for that.
So hopefully those resources will serve you well as you move forward throughout the process. And thanks for the question. All right, so topic selection then. If you have any questions about topic selection, throw them in the Q&A. I see we just received one, Dr. Tribble. Is that about topic selection?
No, it's not. It's one I probably should answer. It's pretty specific, so I'll just answer
Okay,
it.
great. Excuse me. So our next kind of topic around feasibility as it relates to human subjects research is for those of you who might be researching special populations. So the federal government defines three populations as vulnerable when it comes to the code, 45 CFR 46 code that I had referred to earlier. And these are populations that are more susceptible to harm or coercion through research. These would be children, so in America, minors 17 and under, incarcerated people, and pregnant people. These types of studies will require full board review. So we know that ahead of time. If you're researching these populations, we know that your process is going to be extended. Full board reviews take longer. When we talk about the review timeline later on in the presentation, you'll understand what I mean. It's not that we discourage people from researching vulnerable populations. There, of course, are many problems that occur in those populations, and valuable research can and should be conducted. It's just that there are things to consider regarding feasibility if you are going to research one of these populations. We have special populations that can then also contribute to feasibility issues. They may not be considered vulnerable by the federal government, but we still must consider risk versus benefit when we think about working with them. Not only that, but we must try to conceive of their ability to provide informed consent. Can the person who is a potential participant inform in an informed way provide consent? So these would be people with non-mainstream racial and ethnic identities. It might be too risky for them to engage in the study, depending on the topic, versus the benefit that would be gained from the study. Most studies don't have direct benefit to people, but the benefit to society and the benefit to contribution to generalizable knowledge, can be considered a benefit. So risk versus benefit does take into consideration how important the work is to society. However, sometimes the risk-benefit ratio is too risky for the IRB to approve a study. And again, that can be around racial and ethnic identities. It can be around sex and gender identities, possibly non-mainstream cognitive, intellectual, or developmental abilities, and many other groups that are not listed here. So if you have questions about that, now is a good time to ask. Following up with the IRB is always a good thing to do so that you are aware of what you might need to provide the IRB when you apply. And these may require full board review. So if you're asking, very sensitive questions, then it's possible that might be elevated to a full board review. If you're working with populations that we want to make sure that you are qualified to work with, then that may require full board review. I didn't see any questions come open for that page, so I'm going to move on. And Dr. Tribble, you can let me know. Actually, I just see now we have one in the chat. So if you could
Yeah,
read
we
that
just
out.
had one in the chat. Favor asks if my participants are parents of toddlers, and during an interview with the parents, their children happen to be there with them, do I need a full board review?
Uh, the two scenarios I can imagine are you might interview them in their home, you might interview them on Zoom, and the child would be in the room. If the child is not the subject of the research, then that would not require anything special. We'd be looking at an interview study with adults, essentially. If I when you say toddler, I mean, we are, I believe, talking about toddlers. So even if the study was about their children and the toddler could overhear what the parent was saying, it's doubtful that that would be an issue either. Just be sure to explain in a couple of sentences that situation in your application. But yeah, since they're not the point of the data collection, then you would follow a typical research study that would involve adults. And an interview kind of methodology, it sounds like, right? Follow up if you have any further questions. And then please consider the Q&A for everyone else in the room if you do have any. So another aspect of feasibility relates to socio-cultural contexts. They're coming into a little bit more focus recently for us as researchers. So what are you asking of participants? This is an important place to start. What kind of information are you gathering about them that's identifiable? Age, ethnicity, income, relationship status, any aspect about them that is demographic and potentially identifiable. You have to ask yourself, is it necessary? A lot of people will do this in some way to pre-screen or uh, as long as your eligibility criteria is very clear, you wouldn't need to do that. So really consider if you need to collect this identifiable information or not. And if you don't need it to answer your research question, then the IRB recommends strongly to remove it. If you're trying to correlate something about someone's age with certain behaviors or their ethnicity with certain factors in their life, then you would need to collect that in order to show a relationship between those two things. So it's not that you can't, and it's not that you shouldn't for certain types of studies, but if you don't need that information to answer a research question, then from our perspective, you should remove it from your study. That's just one aspect of social cultural contexts. Kind of the other part of that is topics related to DEI. We know that those are changing. How those are received is changing. And the risk associated with being involved with research or anything else related to DEI is changing. So we do know that archival data that was once available may no longer be available. So make sure, keep an eye on if you're looking for archival data that might not be permanent. And then for some populations, it might be too risky for participants to agree to be part of the study. And they may decide that, or we may decide that as a board. And it's important to consider that. This is not meant as to chill research in any way, shape, or form being done at the institution. Just something to consider. Are you going to have access to what it is that you're looking to access to complete your study? And I think that those sociocultural contexts are worth considering. I did see in the chat someone had mentioned age. Yeah, so if you don't need that, then don't collect it. Sometimes people will put age in their eligibility criteria. So I'm looking for people who are 18 to 45 years old or whatever, because they're studying, early professionals or something like that. So sometimes age is important to have in your study, and sometimes it's just not necessary. And if it is partially identifying, then we would ask that you not include it. All right. So that was feasibility and social cultural context. We have a few more of these to go. We're a little more than halfway through our time here. We're doing well. And so please do ask any questions that you might have. We certainly have time to talk about them. One of our concerns about feasibility is especially with novice researchers. So this could be students, it could also be our larger NU community. Is how much experience do you have as an investigator to be researching the specific topic you're researching, or to be researching it in the specific way that you're researching it? So to approve research, we must determine that the research personnel, so that typically means the PI, but could mean for larger studies, a co-investigator, possibly some additional study personnel. So we just need to make sure that the research personnel are adequately trained and knowledgeable regarding the procedures, as well as the protection of human subjects research participants. We typically do this by making sure everybody has taken their city training, right? And we have specific modules. So if you haven't done the city training yet, uh, certainly our page directs you how to complete that, and you will likely have already done that by the time you get to the IRB stage in any of your coursework. Um, and if you're not in courses, then make sure that you affiliate with National University and take the required research courses there. So that's part of it, is we want to make sure that everybody is adequately trained and knowledgeable. In order to describe that to us, we have a brief summary in our application about the relevant research experience and training of the researchers. So most of the time, this is just one principal investigator, but can involve others as well, regarding the responsibilities for the protocol. And protocol is a term that I might have used for the first time here. Essentially means your application, your plan, your protocol for doing your research. So uh, if the study involves children, we typically, normally we see people who have worked with children doing the research. If study involves an other vulnerable population, we look to see that you've had experience with those populations, maybe education, maybe a certification or a degree regarding vulnerable populations, special populations. And then risky questions. We need to make sure that if you are going to ask questions that might cause somebody to revisit trauma that they've experienced, that you know what to do in that situation. So typically we're looking for some sort of mental health certificate for people who will be researching that mental health type of study. So your experience is important. For most of you who are students, you don't have a lot of experience. You have your research courses that you've taken, and then you have your discipline and any work that you experience that you have that might relate to the research study that you're doing. And so we want you to explain that. And if we feel that you're not experienced enough or knowledgeable enough to, say, research a risky topic, then we will ask you to change your research to one that we do believe you are qualified to research. So keep that in mind. If are kind of, how shall we say, pushing the envelope of special populations and risky subjects. All right, moving forward, if there are no questions, we have site permission, which has come up a few times already. Site permission can refer to physical sites going into a specific location, utilizing specific materials. But the term also applies to virtual sites as well as other forms of private resources, so email addresses, things like that. You'll need to obtain permission if you plan to do any of the following. So pretty kind of inclusive list here, so I'll let you take a look at it for a second, but ultimately we're talking about a resource that you don't own, right? So if you have accessed a resource because you say work there, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can access it for your research purposes. If it's something you own, like your Rolodex that has a bunch of email addresses in it, then that is your personal resource. If it's your own Facebook page or a Facebook group that you moderate and run, then that's your resource. If it's someone else's Facebook group that is moderated or owned or managed by someone else, then you would need permission. We certainly have a lot of different kinds of these, and we talk about permission in our recruitment group writing session or group session. So please consider attending that to learn a little bit more about site permission. I thought I might have seen something come through. Kelly, are we okay?
We're okay. I just had a question about someone having trouble logging into the city training thing, but I'm getting that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So we have sites that are various different kinds. Like I said, some are physical, many are not. And uh, certainly if you're doing anything related to the government, uh, the military, police, another country, these are all going to require at least a one site permission, if not more. Typically, if you're going to get a list of emails from a corporation to send out to their employees, that would be one permission from someone in a position of authority. If it's a school, often the building kind of administrator, so a principal or a district administrator, a superintendent, depending on the scope of the study, would be appropriate. And for what I had mentioned earlier, an email or a Facebook message from Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever group moderator would suffice. So there's a couple different ways to prove site permission, and I'll talk to you a little bit more here about site permission and the timing of it. So do you have a site permission letter as you are ready to apply to the IRB? And if not, how difficult will this be to get? How time consuming? How many different layers will you have to go through to get it? These are things to consider. You're not recruiting people when you get site permission. You're just asking if it would be possible later for you to utilize the resources to recruit or collect data. So you're not stepping outside of the bounds of the process. If you go to a potential site permission grantor and say, do you think you would grant permission, for this type of study? And that way you would know if later on, when you sent them the formal site permission letter, which had the specifics of the study in it, that they would be more than likely to sign it. If you reach out cold to, who you hope to give you permission when you've got a dissertation approved or when you've written your entire proposal, if you're a faculty member, then that might be too late. You might not be able to get permission. So thinking about the timing of the site permission, if needed, is important. Thinking about who you would have to go to and how long that might take, depending on the organization and what you're trying to do for your study. Remember that your role as an NCU researcher is separate from any roles you may hold at the site. So just because you have access to something doesn't mean you have access to it for research purposes. So you may need permission in order to use it in your NU research. And then if you need our approval first, we have a process for that. So I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. We can conditionally grant approval if site permission is the only thing that we're waiting for. Sometimes multiple IRBs are required. People who do research at university campuses, hospitals, other institutions that require IRB approval, some K through 12 districts. And it depends on the other IRB really, because we're amenable, what the process is. So it's typically the case that they want to approve it first anyways. And then you can bring that approval to NCU, and we generally rubber stamp the approval. We'll look through it, make sure it contains everything that we need to make a determination, and then we usually go with the original IRB. If they decide that they want our approval first before they're going to approve, or if they're going to provide permission, right? So it could be one or the other. There could be a board that says, we're not going to even give you permission until we see the approval from NU. And there's other institutions that might say, we're not going to let you apply to our IRB until we see approval from NU's IRB. So in both of those scenarios, we would provide um, a conditional approval. So if they need approval first from us, then have something in writing that says that. So a letter from them, an email from them that says we need NU's approval before we will move ahead. We will take that in your application, look at everything else, and then be able to make a decision, provide you with that conditional approval letter that you can then take to your site, either get your permission or apply to their IRB at that point. I saw it come through in the chat. We do have a template on our website for our site permission that you can utilize. So thank you for asking that. Some of the links in the early part of the um, presentation and the one that Dr. Tribble just dropped in the chat will get you to that template, along with some information about site permission. We do encourage you to take this as a launch pad and move off into our larger website where you can find great information about all parts of the process. All right, so multiple IRBs, not as common, but we do see these. And then for the students in the room, we have program-based research requirements that can all often contribute to how feasible your study is. They can add another layer to the already several layers that you have to consider if you have program-based research requirements. So can you collect that data in a reasonable amount of time? So a lot of these will revolve around time, right? How much time will participants have to spend in your study? Essentially, how long is data collection? Are you going to have a 4-month period of data collection for a 3-month class? Obviously, that wouldn't work. Are you concerned that the activities would take too long? Took me too long to write would, as there. I see I put an extra D. Would it take too long? And would they drop out? I mean, this could be a problem for anybody, but especially for students who are on a timeline. And then, is your whole study something that you could do in whatever time you're given? We do have some students who come through the IRB in an 8-week course. We have some students who are in dissertation courses who want to finish in 12 weeks rather than take any supplemental courses. We have faculty and staff considering, when they want their publication to be counted for professional development reasons. So you need to consider these components in any research setting, but especially one that is tied to, course length, right? So think about these if they apply. Certainly, for many of the people that attend our webinars, they do. All right, so just a little bit more to review before we're finished here. I'll stop and ask if there are any questions, Kelly, that you saw come through in the last few minutes.
No, they are. We had a few questions and they've been answered, I believe. And so
All
we're
right,
still
great. Well,
hanging.
hopefully that means folks are getting the information that they need.
Yeah.
We're getting a little bit here at the end about the review process, since again, as I said, most people have questions about this, no matter what topic they've come to hear about. So we do have the initial IRB submission, and then you can see the second step would be just for students. So if you're not a student, you would jump right to that third step. If you are, then your faculty chair or mentor would review your submission, certify it. So it makes it to the IRB there at step 3. And we do a kind of cursory review to make sure it's complete. So it's not missing major chunks, right? So it's not a review, it's just a quick triage to see if it's reviewable. That takes 2, maybe 3, but I haven't seen one take 3 days in a very long time in order for our staff to determine, yes, this is reviewable, or no, this needs to go back. So if it does need to go back, changes are requested, and you start the process over again. If it's determined that the application is complete, then it moves on for IRB review, and I'll show you these timeline numbers in a few minutes. but is 7 to 10 days for a full review. And then depending on if you have revisions or not, you may begin the process over again. If everything is in order, these last two steps just take a few minutes for the determination to be made and the acceptance letter to be sent via your institutional email address. So these are the general steps. You can see at any point your chair might request changes. The IRB pre-reviewer might request additions to anything that's been left out. And then your IRB reviewer will give a full account of your application and let you know any revisions that might be needed or approve the study at that point. So that's our process, and our timeline is an estimated one. Generally, there are a couple times of the year when things get a little busy at the IRB, but generally we're able to keep these timelines very consistent, as I had mentioned before, 2 to 3 days. If it's reviewable, if not, it goes back to you, and then 7 to 10 business days once it reaches our reviewer. So we pride ourselves on taking that amount of time. We're well below the national average for IRB review times by about half. So that's something that we know is important, especially for our students. The important reminders about our group sessions, please do consider attending any of these: eligibility, recruitment, consent, or the application. And then if you are a student, make sure that you have all of your, I'm sorry, this is true for all PIs, that you have all of your supplemental materials ready before you apply. Things like your recruitment email, your recruitment flyer, your consent form, any site permissions, right? So have those all ready before you apply. And then additionally, for dissertation students out there, you need to have your approved proposal before you can apply. There's an attestation button that you have completed and have a fully approved proposal before you can submit your application. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get into our system and look around and add information as you have it. You just cannot submit your application until you either have all your supplemental materials or you have your supplemental materials and an approved proposal. All right. We do have this wonderful email staff that will attend to your questions same day, next day, and it's usually just 2 people. So you're not getting the runaround between different people. You will get an answer, even to very specific questions. So please consider that a useful resource. And then, of course, our website is available here again and contains great amount of information. So we'll stick around for a little bit longer. I think I see a few questions coming in, but I just want to thank everybody for attending today. Understand if you want to duck out a few minutes early. If not, please stick around and we'll have a little question and answer session till the top of the hour. So thanks everybody for coming, and we always appreciate these opportunities to reach out to the community. Appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, everybody. We did have a question in the chat from Melissa. Just, is it possible for a study to do a study with minors with a disability? If is it possible that can be approved if the researcher has access to them and permission to the research site and experience with the population? So sure, all of that's possible, I believe. It could depend on some other factors, what types of questions you're asking, could elevate risk level and things like that. But we've seen similar studies come through, right?
Yes, definitely. That definitely would be a full board study, which often takes 1 month for an initial review. So it can be time consuming. And that's due to the population, irregardless of your experience with them. So we would need to have the full board in on the decision. So that wouldn't change, but we certainly have approved studies like that. There's kind of 2 ways to do them. One is to recruit them through their parents, and the other one is to do some things in an existing educational setting. So if these are, say, students of yours or clients of yours, and the situation is already there, and you're just studying the situation, that's a very different scenario than kind of proposing something new like an interview or any other kind of intervention that you might do. So depending on which path you took, the materials and the application would look different. We have kind of the parental permission and the child assent information on our consent page on our website. And then on our information letter page on our website, you'll find that other track where you would go down if you were in this situation already with these students or clients, and then you were doing something like studying what was already happening in that situation. So hopefully that helps with that. Any other questions that you see?
I see um, someone's asking a quick question. Your IB is reviewed by a single individual and not a committee. And I think it just depends. We have several analysts that review our applications, but each one is assigned one application and they will review it. If it needs to be elevated to a full board, then it will go to the full board. But many of the applications, the research designs that we see are simple enough and minimal risk enough that they get expedited without having to go to the full board. Would that be
That's correct.
accurate, Chen?
Yep. And, this is through best practices and IRBs where the same analyst is with the application throughout its lifespan, if you will, so that there is no uh, extra questions that get asked by someone else, right? So that can happen sometimes. But all of our analysts do have direct channels to our associate director and our director, and are in regular contact with them for advice as they do their reviews. So it's sort of like an analyst plus two directors does each review. And then, yes, if it is bumped up to the full board level, then we have about 15 people on the board that would review and provide direction for a full board study. So it is a very different animal, and you can see why it's much more time consuming to do a study that's full board. Uh, the study we just discussed uh, would likely be full board either way. If you recruited the parents and the children with disabilities through them, or if you did an information letter already existing normal educational setting just because of the population. But yes, not all studies, in fact, most studies do not elevate to the level of full board. Well, thanks everybody. I do see a couple of thank yous coming in. We're certainly here for another minute or two. I see a question, but I don't see the whole thing from Letitia there. Can you see that one?
It says, is the application on the template two? I answered a series of questions, but I don't know if that was the start to the application. Probably not, Letitia. Our application does not exist in template form. It's that whole Cayuse application system. It's a separate sort of online portal that you have to log into and set it up and begin answering your questions that way. So we have a whole session on that. You're welcome to attend. And there's also several videos on our website that show you how to log in and get started filling out that IRB application.
Try to keep our video short, so it should just take a few minutes to get that info. All right. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much. We do just have a second or two longer if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, we'll end our webinar. And I just want to thank everybody who's left for coming, and to thank Kelly for your help during this presentation. If I can just get you to copy and paste those
Yep.
chat and Q&A, we'll get those out. So just as a final reminder to anybody who's watching this webinar, our Q&A, completed Q&A, as well as the PowerPoint will be available on our webinar's webpage on our IRB website. So thanks again. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Bye now.